It was supposed to be just another Saturday. The kind of day where kids laced up their cleats, parents filled the sidelines. And the biggest worry was whether the team had remembered the orange slices. But for Daniel's family, that day at the local soccer field in 2018 would change their lives forever. Just minutes after halftime, their 9-year-old son, Ethan, vanished. No one saw him leave, no one heard a struggle, and the crowd was too distracted by the game to notice anything strange. One moment he was chasing the ball, and the next, he was gone. Police searched the field, the woods nearby, even questioned every coach and parent. But days turned into weeks, and the trail went cold. Rumors swirled, suspicions grew, but nothing concrete ever surfaced. Ethan's dad, Daniel, refused to give up. He quit his job, poured everything into the search, and visited every clue, no matter how small. Still, nothing ever led back to Ethan. Then, 4 years later, Daniel received an unexpected call from someone at the old club's storage facility. They were clearing out some old lockers and came across something that didn't belong, something that hadn't been touched in years. Daniel rushed over. What he found inside one locker stopped him in his tracks and sent a chill down his spine. The name on the locker. It belonged to someone he'd trusted with his son's safety the most. And what was hidden inside raised even more questions than answers. Daniel stood frozen in front of the locker, heart pounding. The old metal door creaked as it opened wider, revealing a small cardboard box shoved toward the back. Inside were a few items that didn't seem important at first: an old whistle, a faded team photo, and a pair of worn soccer cleats far too small for any of the current players. But then Daniel spotted something that made his breath catch: Ethan's favorite wristband. It was the same one he wore every game, a gift from his mom, with a tiny stitched soccer ball and the number 7. There was no way it could be a coincidence. The locker had belonged to Coach Ray, the man who had always been friendly, patient, and deeply involved with the kids. No one ever suspected him. But shortly after Ethan disappeared, Ray moved out of state, claiming a family emergency. At the time, no red flags were raised. Now, everything felt different. Why did Coach Ray still have Ethan's wristband? Why had it been hidden away and never turned over to police? Daniel took the photo from the box and noticed something else strange. In the background, blurred behind the team huddle, was a figure near the trees. It was small, just a shape, but something about it didn't sit right. He didn't remember seeing that figure before. He knew he needed answers, but the deeper he looked, the more questions began piling up, ones that would challenge everything. He thought he knew. Daniel couldn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table, the team photo spread out under a small lamp. His mind replayed every memory of that game: Ethan's laughter on the car ride, the way he ran onto the field with pure excitement, and how everything had changed in the blink of an eye. The police had searched everywhere. They questioned. People scanned security cameras, even brought in dogs. But Ethan had simply vanished. Now, years later, this single wristband in a forgotten locker was all Daniel had to go on. He called Officer Ramirez, the one who had worked Ethan's case from the beginning. Ramirez was retired now, but agreed to meet for coffee. When Daniel showed him the wristband and photo, his face changed. "We never had this," he said, pointing to the wristband. "And I don't remember that figure in the background either." He offered to contact a forensic analyst he trusted, someone who could enhance the image and try to identify the figure. Meanwhile, Daniel decided to dig into Coach Ray's past. He started visiting old teammates and parents from the league. Of the moms, Marcy said something that gave Daniel chills. Coach Ray was always around the boys after practice. Sometimes he'd give them rides home, even when it wasn't on his way. No one thought much of it at the time, but now, paired with the locker discovery, It raised unsettling questions. Daniel knew he was getting closer to something, but he didn't yet know how dangerous it would be. Daniel's hands trembled slightly as he scrolled. Through the grainy footage, Ramirez's contact had managed to recover from an old-school security system. It was faint, barely visible, but there was a shadowy figure leading a boy. A small boy with a bright jersey, away from the soccer field fence. The timestamp was a match. It was the exact day Ethan vanished. Daniel paused the video, zoomed in. The figure's build, the posturate looked a lot like Coach Ray. Daniel's heart pounded. Why was this never part of the investigation? He drove to the now-abandoned building where the old team used to practice. An indoor space owned by the local rec board but closed down just a year after Ethan disappeared. He had a key, still, from volunteering. He stepped inside, the silence, thick and stale, the smell of dust and old equipment lingering. As he walked down the hallway, he noticed a locker that had been sealed shut with layers of duct tape and rusted bolts. The number on it matched the one from Ray's locker at the other facility. Daniel's breath caught. Hey. He got on the phone and called Ramirez, whispering, "I found something." Then a sound. A soft, scraping noise from the other side of the wall. He froze. This wasn't supposed to happen. He thought the place was empty. He took a step back, listening. The noise came. Again closer this time. Daniel reached into his pocket for his flashlight and slowly turned toward the source. Pulse racing, the beam from Daniel's flashlight flickered as he turned the corner, aiming it toward the sound. The hallway stretched into shadow, lined with unused gear and broken lockers. Then he saw a faint outline of a trapdoor in the floor just behind the sealed locker. It wasn't visible unless you were right next to it. Kneeling down, he brushed away the dirt and debris, revealing a worn handle. His chest tightened as he tugged, the door creaking open to a steep wooden staircase descending into darkness. Daniel hesitated. Something about this didn't feel right, but he couldn't walk away. He descended slowly, each step groaning under his weight. The air grew colder the farther he went. At the bottom, he found a small room, dimly lit by an old utility. Bulb swaying overhead. Shelves lined the walls, filled with faded team photos, worn soccer cleats, and dusty notebooks. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. Ethan's missing soccer jersey. The number 9 still visible, draped across a chair. But that wasn't the only thing. Pinned to the wall was a map, one marked with several locations, dates, and names. All boys, all around Ethan's age. Some of them he even recognized from old missing posters. This wasn't just about his son. It was bigger, much bigger. Just then, footsteps echoed from above. Someone else was in the building. Daniel quickly shut off his flashlight and ducked behind a shelf, heart thudding as the trapdoor creaked shut once more. Daniel held his breath as the footsteps drew closer. They were slow, deliberate, someone who knew this place well. Through a crack in the shelf, he caught a glimpse of a familiar silhouette. It was Coach Reynolds. The same man who had led the search years ago, who comforted him when Ethan vanished, who stood beside him at every press conference. But now, he moved with unsettling calm, unlocking a drawer in the far corner and retrieving what looked like another photo. Daniel squinted. It was a recent picture of another young boy, same age, same jersey. Rage and confusion surged through Daniel. He lunged out from his hiding spot, catching Reynolds off guard. The photo fluttered to the floor as they struggled, years of pain and questions fueling every movement. "Where is my son?" Daniel shouted, slamming him against the wall. Coach Reynolds froze, his face pale. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I was trying to protect them from something worse." Just then, a low beeping sound started from the back of the room. Daniel's eyes darted to a small black box hidden under the shelf, wired, blinking red. It wasn't just a hideout. It was rigged. Reynolds looked panicked now. "I didn't know they said it. We need to leave now." As they ran up the stairs, the trapdoor slammed shut behind them. An explosion echoed beneath, destroying everything. The map, the photos, the proof all gone. But Daniel clutched one thing he had grabbed in the chaos: a small notebook marked E. Taylor, Ethan's initials. And inside, a clue. Daniel sat on the front steps of his home, the small notebook resting in his hands like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside were drawings, short notes, and a list of names of their boys, just like Ethan. Some were marked with check marks, some weren't. Among them, Ethan's name stood out, circled twice, with one line scribbled beside it: "Safe for now." It didn't explain everything, but it was enough to shift the fear into hope. Coach Reynolds had been taken in for questioning after emergency responders arrived. His story unraveled under pressure. He had been part of a group, convinced they were saving these kids from unstable homes or dangerous environments. But over time, that mission had become twisted. Daniel didn't understand all of it, and maybe he never would. But one thing was certain: Reynolds had led him to the one thing that mattered most, a sign that Ethan was still alive. Or at least had been not long ago. Months later, Daniel stood at the edge of a field, watching kids run drills. He'd started volunteering with local youth teams again, not because he wanted to forget, but because he refused to give up. Every passing day brought new updates.